Real time. Okay, so it is 4th of July. And of course, we're going to talk about freedom. But today I want to talk about our freedom to be one. To be one within ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. To be one with another, and to be one with that all presence, that all power, all that is. That's another way of saying God. But God is such a, we have those little ideas of God being the old gray-haired guy on the cloud and whatever your background might be, or no background at all, or possibly you don't believe in God, which is okay. The fact is there is a presence and there's a power, and you have the freedom, regardless of whether or not you have a construct of God, you have the freedom to have your own opinion, to have your own thoughts about it. I mean, that is what our nation was founded on. This flag represents freedom. It represents, yes, literally our freedom from Great Britain, our freedom from being a colony and to being able to form a democracy, but it also represents our freedom on a very individual and personal level. This separation idea that freedom is about separation. Today I want you to shift a little bit and let freedom be about oneness. Let's drop the duality of I'm separate from you, I'm different from you. I'm the same as you. You are the same as me. We have the freedom to see ourselves separately if we want to, or we have the freedom to look in one another's eyes, to live consciously, celebrating the divinity. We have the freedom to know who we are in this world, and that we're divine. And we can look around and see there is nothing but divinity. Do you trust me on that? There is nothing but divinity. It's in the eyes of the beholder. We know the phrase, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Divinity is in the eyes of the beholder. And we have the freedom to see divinity. So this is July, and I promised you last week that we're going to talk about the basic principles. And so since Norma's speaking on July 25th, I'm going to spend the next 3 weeks talking about the 5 basic unity principles, which means I have to double up a couple of times, but that's all right. So today we're going to talk about these first 2. Remember our little finger puppet thing? God is, I am, I think, I pray, I do. Together? God is, I am, I think, I pray, I do. One more time. God is, I am, I think, I pray, I do. That's your shorthand, right? When someone asks you about unity. I think I've told you this story before, about like 20 years ago when I was first in Unity. I was at a lunch, and some guy was sitting there, and he said, the great thing about Unity is you don't have to believe anything. And I was like shocked. Because the great thing about unity is you get to believe everything. You get to believe this and that, and that, and everything else. Because there's not just one way. There are many paths to the one God, the one presence, the one all there is, all that is. There's only one of that energy in the world that we call God, but it's energy. Norma's going to teach you about that because she mentioned energy today. That presence that we sense, we're not sensing something outside of ourselves. We're sensing an aspect of ourselves, that energy within us, and it's also in the tree, and it's in the grass, and it's in the little baby deer that was here last week. You saw the little fawn out the window, so beautiful. Now you can look at that fawn
and you know that creation is a creation of God. You can feel it. That's why we love to look at them and go, oh, it's so precious, because we get that resonating feeling with that innocence and that beauty and that vulnerability. But why don't we get that with one another? You're just as innocent and vulnerable and beautiful as a baby fawn. Every moment is just as innocent and beautiful and vulnerable as a baby fawn. How can a moment be innocent? Because it's pure potential. How it turns out, what it becomes, is completely up to you. It's all, the vulnerability is in the fact that it is created through our thoughts and our words and our perception of that moment. So it's very vulnerable. It's very innocent. Those words are words that sometimes we take exception to, and we build up walls to protect ourselves from being those things. But if you want to live in awe, if you want to know divinity, if you want to live consciously, we've got to come back around to being innocent, to being vulnerable, to allowing for awe, allowing for those moments.
So the 5 principles: God is absolute good, everywhere present. I am as well as you. We are all an expression of that good. I think, my thoughts create. There's an energy that goes out with your thoughts. You know this is true. It creates that next moment. This is where the vulnerability comes in, and where we're not taught enough about protecting ourselves, not from defensiveness, not from a defensive place, but from that co-creative place. Because we are co-creators, that thought is powerful, and it's making things happen all the time. And of course, prayer and meditation, when we get aligned, when we go into that stillness, that one breath at a time, as we did in the meditation, one breath at a time, we allow ourselves to connect, to let go of the thoughts and the distractions and the tangible here and now to the greater here and now, the here and now that's infinite, that we get to co-create from. And then, of course, we need to put it into practice. We need to make a commitment to ourselves and to our world to actually do it. I do. I think, I pray, I do every day make a commitment. I spend time in meditation. You know, prayer is not a complicated thing. You don't have to pray in a certain way. I grew up in Southern Baptist, and I always felt really insecure about praying, because there was a salutation, there were words and phrases that you used to invoke that blessing, and then you had to close in a certain way. And I was so nervous as a young child. I just did not have confidence in my ability to pray. And now that I'm over that, I love to pray. Because prayer is that moment I'm connecting, and then I'm communicating and putting that vibration into the world. And it's joyful. But it doesn't matter. If I just say to someone something that's from a consciousness of blessing them, it is a prayer. Also, when you criticize, you are praying. I hate to tell you that. But when you're harping on the negative, you're also praying. You're just praying for the opposite of what you really want. And we have to live consciously and be responsible for that fact. So God is good, and I am. That's what we're talking about today. God is that absolute good, and I'm an expression. I am an expression. Say that with me for yourself. I am an expression of God. I am. Come on, own it. I need to see some of that. Live it. I mean, I want right now you commit to that statement for me. Okay? Ready? I am an expression of God. Doesn't that feel good? Then you might get chills. You might get a little, ooh, yeah, that's true. I know Ray did, because he does know that. So, to help with this talk, now I'm not going to read you, I'm going to read you a little bit from this book today, but Ellen Davenport, actually I used to work for her in Dallas at one point. She was the minister of Unity of Dallas after, she came on as an associate minister, and then whenever David McClure was let go to find his greater good, then she was selected as the next minister. And then she was over in Wimberley for a while, and now she is the, I think it's called the Vice President of Communications at Unity Worldwide. But she wrote this book, The 5 Principles, a guide to practical spirituality, which is what we call Unity, because, as you know from what I teach every week, it is all about how do we do this, how do we walk, how do we take one step at a time as we're taking one breath at a time, and live from principle. So in this book, and there's also a companion book that she and Mindy Odlin put together, which is for spirit groups, which was what they call small groups. So if you decided to have your book study group again, this would be a fun one to get together and read, and then have the companion booklet. I know I keep suggesting. And one of these days, somebody's going to say, okay, we'll start meeting again and having these discussions. I know Chuck misses it, right? The discussions at 9:30, the book study group. So I want to just share with a little bit from this book with you. So she is, in this first book, God is All. That's the chapter. She says, the writer of the book of John resorted to lyrical mystical language. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Again and again, Jesus spoke of his oneness with the Father and the divine. His Father, the divine. But this was not news. For thousands of years, humans had understood and tried to describe the unity of the universe. And if you've ever tried to articulate this yourself, you know how hard it is, right, Norma? It kind of, it's that 5th principle. You've got to kind of lean into it and let it live you, so that you know, but it's really hard to put in words, to tell someone else what you know when you're living from that consciousness. She says the Buddhist sutras envisioned a net stretching in all directions. The Hopis spoke of Spider Grandmother, who spun a great web connecting all things. To the ancient Chinese, it was the Tao, or the flow of the universe. The hymn of creation from the Hindu Rig Veda speaks of the absolute called Brahman, and describes it as ultimate, eternal, and beyond human description. This is the ground of being, or infinite reality. We hear the names of God, Holy Spirit, the universe, the way, Father, Mother, Creator, Divine, One Mind, Source Energy, First Cause, and thanks to Star Wars, the Force. The fourth be with you, right? Today is the 4th. So, you got that. So it has to be, it has also been named Allah, Buddha, Christ, Kali, which is from Hindu, Shiva, Krishna, and Kuan Yin. All concepts of the divine. Physicist Max Planck, the originator of the quantum theory, spoke of conscious and intelligent mind. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell, he formed the IONS, if you know IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences. So Edgar Mitchell, when he went into space, as he was coming back to Earth, he came into contact with all there is. And he had an awakening. Now, he doesn't call it spiritual. He just calls it Gnostic. But he had that moment, that Satori moment of awakening, and he formed this Institute of Noetic Sciences so that science and the mystical, inexplicable, could be combined and support one another. He called it nature's mind.
And in scientific terms, it is a field of pure potential and energy that underlies all creation. That's why we say there's that divine potential in all. It's the energy that underlies everything. And she goes on to say, humans have always sensed, we have deeply understood that there is an infinite foundation to the universe and cohesive to all that we see and all that we are. We read it in sacred writings through the ages. We see it celebrated in rituals, burials, dance, song, art, throughout the times and culture. She says, all that is, the energy that we call God cannot have any boundaries. An eternal life force cannot be an empty or supreme, an entity or a supreme being with opinions or judgments. Now, a lot of us grew up being told that God judges us, that God has wrath, that God has human characteristics. Well, I'm sure that you've heard the phrase, we were created, human beings were created in the image and likeness of God, and then we turned around and did the same thing right back. So we have created, because humans are limited in our perspective. If you're not praying and meditating, then you think this is it, right? This human form is everything. But when you begin to pray and meditate and you commit to having a spiritual life, you understand this is very little of who you are and what life is. This is just this moment. And the physical part of it is a limitation, if anything. But she says, God simply is the source of all energy. Think about that. God simply is the source of all energy. The source of all energy. The energy that it takes to create a leaf. The energy that it takes to heal our bodies. God is the source of all of that. Therefore, God is all of that. All of you, all of me, all of every moment in time. So every morning, I read over and over from this little book. The Tao Te Ching has been translated many, many times by many, many people. But Jonathan Starr took 12 years to learn Chinese. And then he's a spiritually grounded person, so when he did his translation, it's really considered to be the epitome, because it has that nuance of understanding that just translating words from one language to another, if you've ever done that, if you've ever learned a foreign language, you know that the words in the order don't always make sense. You have to understand the context. As a matter of fact, Jesus spoke Aramaic, which is a dead language, but it's so nuanced. We don't really know what the Bible said originally. We don't know how those words were put together originally. But what we do know is the context in which it was being said, and we know the heart of the man Jesus was all about love. So we can trust what we know from Jesus about love. But I want to share this verse with you, verse 14. And I want you to just listen, and I'm going to take a moment and get centered, because I hope that the words that come out of my mouth can be heard by your heart, because this really struck me. And we're talking about Tao, which Tao, Lao Tzu, who is attributed to writing the Tao or communicating the Tao, said the Tao which can be named is no longer the Tao. So words are not going to express it, but what I hope is that you'll have the feeling of this. If you'd like to close your eyes, you may, or you can keep them open. But verse 14, according to Jonathan Starr, goes like this. Eyes look, but cannot see it. Ears listen, but cannot hear it. Hands grasp, but cannot touch it. Beyond the senses lies great unity, invisible, inaudible, intangible. What rises up appears bright, what settles down appears dark. Yet there is neither darkness nor light, just an unbroken dance of shadows. From nothingness to fullness and back again to nothingness, this formless form, this imageless image, cannot be grasped by mind or might. Try to face it. In what place will you stand? Try to follow it. In what place will you go? Know that which is beyond all beginnings, and you will know everything here and now. Know everything in this moment, and you will know the eternal Tao. We can't see it, we can't hear it by trying to hear it. We hear it when we get still. You can't touch it by trying to reach for it. You can't grasp it. But you know it's there. Always that energy of creation, that truth. So from verse 32, so I was reading this one morning, and it, to me, in trying to explain, because I've been trying to explain to someone recently what oneness is and how it is that we are an expression of God. And this really helped me to kind of put it into context. Rivers, and this is from verse 32, and it's the very end, the last 4 lines. Rivers and streams are born of the ocean. All creation is born of Tao. Just as all water flows back to become the ocean, all creation flows back to become Tao. Rivers and streams are born of ocean. All creation is born of Tao. Just as all water flows back to become the ocean, all creation flows back to become Tao. All creation, including us, because we were never not Tao. We're always Tao. We're always God expressing in each unique form. Everyone is, not just the good people that we label good people, not just the nice people, not just the holy people, everyone and everything in every moment. So here's what came to me and when I read that water is God. Not that God is water, yes, that's true, but water is also God. So think of it out of this way. We've all seen these basic, this like 4th grade or something, we learned about the cycle of water. But see, human beings are made up more than 80% of water. The earth is made up more than 80% of water. We're talking about that vibration that goes out. Vibration travels in water. So God is water. Water is God. So no matter what form it takes, whether it comes down in snow in the mountains, or it melts and flows down, or it's absorbed into the tree as trunk and limbs and leaves, it's still water. It's still God. Is that coming together for you? To me, it was an aha moment. I just like, there it is. That's how I can see it. I can feel it. But then when it travels down and becomes the ocean, it's the river and it's the ocean, but it's still water. It's still God in many, many forms. And then it gets taken up as it evaporates, and then it becomes condensation again. That's God, that energy. If you think of that energy the same as water, it's a cycle. It takes a form. It wants to express as a human being, or a cat, or a squirrel. but it's still God expressing it in these various forms. And you might be going, yeah, I hear it. I'm not in the 3rd grade. I don't need this. But let it sink in. If this is not a concept that you've ever allowed to just flow through you, because you are God. How does that feel? You are. You are God. You're not all that God is, but God is all that you are. And this is proof in my book. I love science. I love proving what we know spiritually is true. But to me, this is such a concrete example that it helps me to really understand this is what I know and what I've known since I was a little child going to Baptist church. Maybe some of the words that I heard didn't make sense to me, but the feeling I had, the knowing I had, was this. So here's my book. I just took a picture of it so you could see. The morning I read this, I went, oh, because I write in all my books. You could never borrow my book, or I could never resell my books. I dog ear all the pages and I write down. When I have a moment like that, it's like, this idea is something I can share that I think will help people if they're struggling with that whole I'm an expression of God, because sadly we have been told so many things about ourselves that are just lies. They're just lies. When people tell you you're limited, when people criticize you, when people find fault with you, they're just lying. They don't mean to be. They think they're being helpful. You know those people. They always want to tell you all the problems you're going to have with all the amazing things that you want to do, all the amazing things that you can conceive of, and all the ways that you're limited. Because their own fears are getting in the way. It's not that they really believe you're limited. They believe they're limited, and their fear is that they could be amazing, that they could really live consciously, live knowing that God is, and I am, and you are. Not just me, not just you. Even those people we disagree with, even those people who look different from us, even people who choose to live their life differently, they are all equally the expression of God. And I know you know that deep in your core. But we have to live from that. We have to live consciously, allowing ourselves to communicate that, to let that be our vibe into the world. Because when we can hold that presence, when we go to Center of Calm Meditation on Thursday, and the class that's coming up, and we learn who we are in this world, and we can live from that, and we can be unflappable in moments of criticism and conflict. So, how do you feel about God is and I am? Yeah? I know you know God is, right? You're comfortable with that. What I really want you to do is embrace the I am part of it. God is, I am. This is the ultimate message of oneness. And on the 25th, Norma's going to add to this idea of oneness with her talk. But we are one. It's not just a hippy-dippy concept from the 60s. Ooh, we're running late. That clock up there stopped moving along. But yeah, it's not just a hippy-dippy concept. Oh, cool, we're all one. It's the truth. So this goes back to ancient scripture, right? I've shared this one with you before. From John 10:30, the Father and I are one. This is when they were challenging Jesus, right before they were threatening to stone him because they thought, oh, you think you're all that. And he's like, the Father and I are one. And he wanted them to get it. This is true for you as well. He was trying to teach people. This is what's going on, folks. It's not just me. Yeah, I'm doing the work. I'm doing miracles. But it's the Father within me, expressing as me, that's doing all of this work. But they were still threatening to stone him. And so down in verse 38, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, so that you may know and understand that the Father is in me, and I in the Father. The Father is in me, but I am also in the Father. You're not all that God is, but God is all that you are. You are an equal component in that greatness, that all good that we call the Father. Jesus called it Abba. There are many, many names for God, but it's all one presence and one power, and it's active in your life and in the universe. So your assignment this week, should you accept it, your weekly practice is to tune in to oneness. Just slow down. Spend some time in the silence, even if you're just taking a walk. You know, I have a tendency to kind of listen to something on my phone when I'm walking, but it's always something positive, but sometimes one little segment will end, and then I'm already connected with the river and the beauty, but then when it gets silent and I don't have a voice in my head, even though it's always saying something positive, then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm here. I'm in this moment with the butterflies and the birds and the squirrel and the deer and the hawk and the vulture and whatever's flying and whatever's moving in the ground underneath my feet. I can feel it, and I know my oneness. And I know my oneness with more than just those physical things that are happening in front of me. Allow yourself to connect and to really know the truth of your being, because I see you. I see all of you, and you're beautiful, and you're magnificent, and I love you so much.